Oh, that's it.
Yep.
Okay. Or I'm getting weak one or the other. I'm not sure which it is.
I know. So, I don't really have dinner, so this is kind of dinner. You were here before, right?
Yeah, I recognize you.
Yeah, what's your name?
I'm really bad at recognizing faces and things, but I do recognize you. I'm Nancy.
Nancy.
Hello.
Hi, Andre.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Andrea. Hi, Jen.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hello. How's the
Andrea.
book going?
Which book? Oh, that book. Offering of Light
That
book. I'm
book.
sorry. Just blanked out.
You got
Oh, it's
multiple
done.
books going, huh?
Oh, it's done.
Good.
Roy, yeah.
Far out.
Roy and Sushi finished it, and we did the last editing, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And Sushi's putting the final touches on it. They're going to print it allegedly sometime this week. They have to have it by the 22nd for the anniversary celebration.
Okay, so that's what the deadline
Yeah.
was about. I knew there was a deadline, so that's what it
I'm
is.
surprised they haven't done it yet. They haven't printed it yet, but they're going to print it soon. Yeah, it should be interesting. I'd like to read it when it's done because they did some really good work on it.
I know
Sushi did an
Roy put a
excellent
lot
job.
of hours in
Oh
on
my
it.
God, you know, and it's 300 pages.
Do you know Roy? Well, that's right.
Oh, I might, but
He'll
we
be
don't
here.
know yet.
He'll be here. He'll be here. Roy,
So you wrote a book?
No.
Oh.
I don't write a book.
Oh,
You
were reading
it.
a book.
I read it. No,
edited.
Oh.
Oh,
I edited. I can't say that.
but you can write.
I can read and edit. Like if I could talk, it would be good. No, I just have
And
to
there's Roy.
edit the book.
Hi,
This
Chris.
is the
Hi,
author
man.
of the book. Well, he translated
Hi,
it.
Roy. Hi, Jim.
Translated it.
Hello.
hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine,
Just
thank
more
you.
things.
300 pages, that's a lot.
Wow.
So he wrote the book?
No, it's actually translated from Offering of Light. I get this book confused with the other book.
Well, he did write one book for sure, didn't he? About this
Yeah, I think this is the book he
organization.
wrote. I think this is the one he wrote.
Ah, okay.
Yes. I can't remember. It had to be rewritten,
Ah,
redone,
revised.
So what is this organization?
Shinji Shumakai. It's a natural agriculture, art, and spirituality center. Did I get that right?
Sounds pretty good to me.
And they also have concerts here.
Oh.
Art exhibits, yeah.
And they art exhibits. And they do jore, which is a form of energy healing.
What is it?
What's that?
Jore.
Yeah, they're from Trader Joe's. I like this
Nice.
particular.
So,
Yeah.
Nice mix of
Roy actually
nuts and
does.
Yeah.
raisins.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Wow.
What is this? Cheese?
Cheddar.
Something else I think.
Cheese.
So, Roy, you wrote The Offering of Light, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking about who wrote it.
Well, yeah. Sushi was more part of the team. The underwriter. He's like the
I was having a hard time articulating.
I think you drained all their brains out of the process.
I really fried
Atsushi
my brain more.
was a project coordinator, researcher, editor, motivator, things like that.
He's not going to translate it into Japanese, right?
What's that?
He's not going to translate it into Japanese.
No.
That wouldn't work.
A big story behind that.
It sounded like it.
Well, plus all the writings of the founder, Meishu-sama, are in Japanese. So that if you read Japanese, it's,
There
easily.
you go.
What?
There you go. Good point, Sandy.
But Atsushi translated a lot of those quotes from Meishu-sama into Japanese for the book.
The quotes.
There's lots of quotes from Meishu-sama
It's
throughout
your
the
book.
What?
It's your book.
It's our book. That's usually like. But anyway, but he translated a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
for
Your
the
meaning
book.
is mine.
Oh, yeah.
I see. Yes.
Yes, running on empty.
It's our book.
Yours books. Yours book.
Save some water for the
Yeah.
iPhone.
I'm trying to
Thank you so
Yeah, I
much.
say they y'all.
Because I probably could
Because you was really plural.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even
yours.
for me.
Some of these words are like,
No, it's I, you, he,
So he's
she,
recovered
it,
from
we,
the
they.
birthday and the
Not
Sunday
quite.
thing? Not
Oh my
quite.
God, I'm not sleeping
Plural.
hardly at all.
You is the plural for you.
I slept
it's
a little
second
bit.
person pronoun, but it can
I
also
was
like
able to go back to
third.
sleep a little bit. So, not much.
I've been sleeping well either, probably for different reasons.
But
There's some,
they say use. And then stuff that's you
I'm
all.
kind of stuck
Use
between
sounds
in
really
a situation
Use
between
is
two
not-
friends.
Grammatically
Oh,
correct.
that's
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
like,
you.
That's
that's like,
fine.
Boston, New York,
And
where
it's
they're
like,
use.
Hey, use.
I had to
Hey.
tell an unfortunate truth to one of them.
You guys going to the movies
Yeah.
tonight?
You know,
So
something
we
that
need
I
second person.
Didn't
really
wanna do.
approve of and didn't want to do. Had
How's
been
that?
able to avoid up to now,
Is Diane coming?
but I just couldn't dodge it
Totally hick
anymore.
talk.
And this person's pretty ticked off at me.
Use.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, that's been causing me to lose some sleep, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Is Diane coming, Sandy?
A friend I've
Well,
had for
welcome.
several
Yeah.
years now, and it's like, well,
I guess that's
Yeah.
not coming.
Well, the friendship is meant to be with friends.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. But there's
Yeah.
some things this guy didn't want to look at,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was creating problems. And, yeah, so I
when
finally
that
had to
satsang
say
here,
something.
Mhm.
Weston,
Yeah.
who came to the one before that, he said he
Wow.
came here and he didn't find the satsang anywhere. It was not last week, but 3 weeks
So
ago.
that's
When we were-
I'm not.
when we were in the-
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
room, he came and he didn't find it.
I had a really,
He was like calling out like hello.
you know how
Well,
I've just
he
been
told me,
doing
so that
this,
week when he
right?
came, we were
And
energetic stuff.
Yeah,
I looked in there.
energetic
I
stuff.
said, look around.
Really
He didn't even
good
come to check.
energy.
Couldn't quite
Yeah,
figure it out.
Sometimes not
But he
really
didn't-
noticing
he
how
didn't
much
want to
to
walk by the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he just
This
tried those
morning
doors
was
and
like
left
this
the lights were off.
real
Maybe.
energy
He wasn't
shift
very persistent, was he?
from
He wasn't very
like the
persistent.
Were those doors
chaos, every
unlocked?
atom in my body
Mostly
feeling
locked because we're not
to
having In the future, you
like
got
a
signs that are saying soft sign
peaceful
arrow that way or
calm.
something.
Yeah,
And-
well, here we can
Maybe
see,
a sign
but
on
Yeah, here you can see, but over in there,
So there's a noticeable shift in the sort of
Ready, guys?
tenor of the
the
Let's begin?
I'm sorry. It's,
No, no, that's fine.
Are you rolling?
Okay.
These are all the cookies on there. Somewhere. Bad
Which one?
cookies.
So,
the back of it.
Everything else is healthy except for the cookies.
Okay.
ready, Fritz?
You're allowed.
Yeah, I'm not.
All right. Let's begin with with a short meditation. I think this okay. So let us begin by taking 3 deep breaths, and during the exhalation, allow your whole body to relax. Right. So let us inhale. And allow your whole body to relax from head to toe. Inhale again. And exhale, relaxing. And once more, inhale deeply. And exhale, relaxing the whole body. All muscles relaxed. So allow your muscles to relax deeper and deeper. Give special attention to the areas where you tend to hold tension and allow those areas to relax. Muscle relaxation leads to a quiet mind. Now gently notice the breath as the air comes in and out by itself. And during the exhalation, you may mentally chant the sound Om during the exhalation. And as you do this simple practice, you may at the same time allow everything else to be as it is. Allow the whole process to be as it is. With the Om sound, you may allow awareness to expand in all directions. So try again. I will have to make a modification here that I don't know what's going to happen with the connection. It is what it is, right?
An exercise in acceptance.
That's correct. Well, wait a second. It's kind of getting stable again. Yeah. Those online, if you can give me feedback about the broadcast, please let me know if you are receiving a good signal. Hi, Mamata. Glad you're participating. You're pretty far away in India, and I would like to know if you are getting a good reception. So far, so good. So the first thing we may consider is what non-resistance is really, right? And non-resistance is acceptance. It's as simple as that. So what are we accepting? We are accepting what is. And as Ramana said, God is what is. What he meant is that the divine, the one universe, unfolds in our experience. And is what it is what we have right in front of us. So we can resist what we have in front of us, or we can accept it, right? So it is like accepting the divine as it is, or rejecting it. Now we can divide our experience in two levels. And this is where non-resistance or acceptance begins to get to be interesting, right? Not so simple. Because our experience in the present moment contains our sensory inputs and what we are seeing, the situation, so to speak, but it also includes another aspect, which is our interpretation of the situation in our own head, and with the corresponding feelings that are arising from that interpretation. So the situation itself is not determining our feelings, how we feel. It's our interpretation of the situation. So by accepting the external situation that we are in, the conditions, we are modifying our internal experience. And we are moving from resistance to non-resistance, and we are raising our level, so to speak, our level of consciousness. Another way to put it is we are moving upward in the map of consciousness. If you look at the map of consciousness from David Hawkins, you find that acceptance calibrates 350, way above integrity. So acceptance, way above courage also. Courage calibrates 200, right? Integrity calibrates 200 and above. So the 200 divides integrity versus non-integrity. And 350 is way up there because the scale is logarithmic on top of it. So at 350 you feel comfortable. While if you are having negative emotions, if you are resisting the situation, you are for sure calibrating below 200. Unless you are resisting with a state of courage, right? Which is different. Because then you're calibrating at 200 and you're comfortable again. Your body is not going weak. But below 200, you are not comfortable. You're having negative. So you may try at that moment to accept what is in the head, the type of thoughts and feelings that you are experiencing in the body, your internal experience. And then what happens is that by doing that, you're moving from the calibration, the calibration that pertains to those thoughts and feelings, again into acceptance, and you're raising your vibration immediately. So you don't need to be so concerned about changing your feelings or changing your thoughts. When you accept the thoughts and feelings in the experience and the experience, boom, you go up and you're okay again. So eventually we want to accept the whole experience, the external and the internal reaction, the external experience and the internal reaction. We want to accept everything. And at that moment, we will be calibrating at least 350, which is a comfortable place to be. Now, David Hawkins suggested that when we want to move into higher levels of consciousness, that we do it by stages, that we don't try to go from, let's say, anger at 150 to boom, bliss at 600, right? It's going to likely not work. So it's common sense, right? But the 350s are kind of in between, and makes us move immediately out of the negative and into a positive state where it's easy to jump from there to even higher levels of feeling and experiencing. So from a non-duality perspective, the question that arises immediately is who accepts, right? Who is accepting the situation? Who is accepting the thoughts? Who is accepting the reactions of the mind-body organism, the feelings? Who is accepting, right? Well, if you look or you inquire into this question, you will find that actually consciousness, what you are really, is not resisting the experience, right? It's just watching the experience. So what is really resisting is the ego, the mind-body organism, and the identification with the mind-body organism. So it's very important to understand this point, because you are not you is the real you is not practicing non-resistance or acceptance. What you are doing is you are putting the ego to practice non-resistance, right? And the ego, the expression of the ego, the voice in the head, right, is either or accept. You move it towards acceptance. It's interesting to realize when you begin to practice non-acceptance and you practice non-resistance, right? It's really a practice, right? It's a practice. So when you see the mind, being restless and so on, put it to practice non-resistance, acceptance of what is. And you will see that everything will begin to change. So how you do that? Well, there is a simple way to do it, which is you begin to notice the breath, and during the exhaling breath, mentally your mind says yes, right? You put the mind to say yes, right, during the exhaling breath, so that whatever is, you're using that yes to accept all the different facets or aspects of your present moment, including the thoughts and feelings, right? So you become very aware of what's going on outside and inside, and you're saying yes to everything, right? Yes to this, yes to that, yes to that. And in that practice, the voice in the head begins to quiet down also. And it becomes less abrasive. So then you will say, okay, but I want to go farther than that. Yeah, of course, right? That is the foundation. See, non-resistance is the foundation of the practicing of non-duality. Then you want to experience higher consciousness. What you're looking for is perception. Allows you to see the experience with new eyes. And when you see the experience with new eyes, and with during a Kensho experience, you are immediately at peace. You are happy. You are your mind-body organism goes into bliss or into joy, and you begin to have an insight into some aspect of the divine. Doesn't need to be necessarily all the aspects of the divine, but one aspect of the divine. So let's remember the story of the elephant and the seven siblings that are watching the elephant, right? And the father of the 7 blind children, they are blind, asked them to wash the elephant, right? So they wash the elephant, and at the end of the process, the father asked them, how is the elephant? And because they are blind, one of them says, well, it's like a column. He was washing the legs, right? The other one says it's like a rope. He was washing the trunk. The other one said it's like a big leaf. He was washing the ears. So each one of them had a different experience of the elephant. And they were blind to the other experiences. So in a Kensho, you have an experience of the divine, but you're blind to the other aspects of the divine. But it doesn't matter, right? You're in a pretty good state at that moment. A Kensho, by definition, is short-lived. It will be just for a while, and then it will pass, right? A Satori, which is another word the Zen teachers use to describe these experiences, is longer, and it will last sometimes many days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years, and then it will fade out. The difference between the state of Kensho and the state of Satori is not in quality, it's in duration and stability. And then both, according to the Zen tradition, are called enlightenment, meaning that at that time you're enlightened, right? But they reserve the term Buddhahood to a state of Satori that is indefinite, that you don't go back to lower states of consciousness. You stay in that Satori or Kensho indefinitely. That's called Buddhahood, right? Now, when you accept the experience that you're having in the here and now, completely, internally and externally, you are not going yet into a Kensho, but it's a very good place to start. It's a very good starting place. So let's say, for example, that you go for a walk, right? And you don't feel at that moment like going into a Satori immediately or a Kensho, right? You're having thoughts and you're somehow grasped, consciousness is being held by the thoughts. Well, begin by practicing acceptance. Don't try to go straight with a pointer directly into a Kensho, because that's what non-duality does, right? Advaita gives us a powerful tool to jump into a Kensho immediately. You can go for a walk and you can say, for example, to yourself, the word this is the oneness unfolding, right? The oneness unfolding. You look at nature, you look at what's going on around you, even in the middle of the city, and you tell yourself the words, this is the oneness unfolding. And when you do that, those words are called pointers. They are not a realization, of course, but they are pointing to a realization, the realization that there is just the oneness unfolding. There are no parts. The universe is undivided. The universe is one. And you can have the experience of oneness in that way, going directly through a pointer. No meditation needed, right? You don't need to meditate 3 hours to go into oneness with Advaita. You can do it just going for a walk and using a pointer, and bang, you're there. And that's the power of Advaita. However, if you go for the walk and you see that it's not happening, I would recommend that you start by practicing acceptance, so that your mind becomes first calmer and you don't have internal conflicts with what is, and with your thoughts and with your feelings. And then from there, it may happen spontaneously that suddenly, bang, you're in a Kensho state. And if it doesn't happen, still you will have a good walk and you will enjoy it, right? Because we don't want to turn these Kensho states or Satoris, we don't want to turn them into a problem, right? Oh, I went for my early walk, my morning walk, and I didn't get a Kensho, right? Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Because that's resistance again. We're resisting what is, right? So acceptance is different than positive thinking, and it's more powerful, I would say. I don't have quarrels with positive thinking, especially positive attitudes, right? Positive attitudes is a better word. But acceptance is different and is more effective. You don't fight your thoughts, your negative thoughts. You transcend them. You accept them in the present moment, and then you transcend them by raising your level of in the map of consciousness. However, it's worth considering that sometimes you may have a thought that can be so scary that you won't be able to do that, right? Or a thought that is so disturbing that you will say, I cannot accept this thought, right? I want to get out of this thought. I want to get rid of this thought. So in that situation, you may resist the thought. And we all know how to resist, so I don't need to teach, right? But I mean, you can find a way through the maze of fighting this negative thought, a way to get rid of it, right? And you will have to fight back that thought with a positive affirmation or whatever. And the only thing I would suggest is that when you enter that state of resistance, which may be not only to a thought, but it could be a resistance to a situation, for example, right? That you will have to resist the situation. Even your life may be at stake, right? So that when you enter that fight, you accept the challenge. You accept the fight. Conflict is part of life. We can't expect that there will be no conflict whatsoever in our lives. So when conflict calls us into action, resisting that is pointless. So we don't resist, and we go with it. And then you need to fight. Whether it is a negative thought, or it's an external situation, or whatever. And I have talked in previous satsangs about, for example, the surrendering technique. That is a good technique to get rid of something that is really disturbing for you, a negative thought, or a negative belief, or a negative feeling, thought, whatever. Then how to apply non-resistance to the realization of our dreams? Well, our highest dreams, the ones that have to do with the soul level, with the expression, with the mission that we all have in life. Each one of us has a certain mission. It can be very modest, but we do have something here to do, right? So when we are in the process of pursuing our goal, the idea is to accept that, is to do your part and embrace the result in whatever way it goes, so that you don't get attached to the fruits of your actions. So you accept that you don't have control over the final result. You only have control over doing your part, right? So that's another application of acceptance. Accepting your limitations in the game. You don't have absolute power here. So you do your part, and whatever happens. that we cannot do in our sometimes may require great distance, right? I was just watching a video and how this cow persists, because the little squirrel had grown a lot, so she was heavy, and here is the mother trying to bring her back to the nest. She had fallen down, right? And the movie is really extraordinary. Is you see the persistence of this animal in doing her part as a mother, and it's tremendous until she succeeds. So persistence is something very powerful, and sometimes that is what is required to fulfill a dream in the world, or your mission, so to speak. I would like to mention something in regard to stress. Again, stress is to a great degree, if you analyze it, is resistance. You can be under a lot of pressure, in a situation with a lot of pressure, but if there is no internal resistance, then there will be very little stress. There will be the natural stress of acting, because stress is part of life, right? Every time you tense a muscle, there is a stress there. But there will be no emotional stress. There will be a flowing with the activity. So a practice non-resistance or acceptance when you are under stress. Accepting your thoughts, accepting your feelings, accepting the experience, accepting what is. And you will see results. And finally, the last thing I want to mention is that many times some experiences in life, they feel unacceptable, right? And when they are painful and unacceptable to us, then when you get there is trauma. So when you go through a painful experience, but there is acceptance, there is no trauma. And when you identify a past trauma, you identify the resistance that at that time in the past you were not able to accept that it has become unacceptable through the years too. And then you psychologize yourself into accepting it, recognizing that that experience is also part of life. It's also part of life in a world like this, right? In other more advanced worlds, there are certain traumas that don't happen. But here, this is a traumatic place. Everyone gets traumatized, right? And why? Because we go through experiences that feel unacceptable. And we believe them to be unacceptable. So when you realize that even that is part of the universe, is part of the potentiality of experiences that can be part of our experience, and you embrace it as possible, then the trauma also tends to it gets released. Maybe not immediately, but over a period of time, if you insist in that position, you will see a big change. So I remember going to a class by an expert in trauma, and he was internationally known for his work. So the first thing he did at the beginning of the session was he drew in the whiteboard a rectangle. And he said, this rectangle picture this rectangle to be your belief system. And the rest of the whiteboard, all the experiences that we can have in our life. So the whiteboard is all the potentialities that can happen, and this rectangle is what our belief system allows for. So if the experience falls, he drew a cross outside of the rectangle. He said, if your experience falls outside your belief system, you cannot integrate it in the psyche. But if the experience falls inside the rectangle, your belief system, says, oh, easy, I can integrate that. Yes, it's possible. You accept, right? So he was explaining that when we get traumatized by something that we cannot accept, basically is calling for expanding our rectangle, right? To include that particular experience that is outside our belief system, that is not acceptable in our belief system. So consider practicing the thought, this is also part of life. This experience is also part of life. And see what happens. Okay, let's go into questions. Okay, Mamata, thank you. You're receiving a good reception. And Kiri also. Good, thanks. So let's move into questions.
For everybody? For everybody?
Yeah, anyone.
I thought maybe just for people. I have a question. So how do you then expand your rectangle?
How you expand? Okay, her question is how you expand that rectangle, which represents your belief system, to include an experience that feels unacceptable and therefore is out of your belief system, right? The expansion is the healing of the trauma. You need to find a way to expand your belief system so that it can include the experience. Now, the how, it leads to different methods to expand our belief system, right? Or different methods to heal trauma is the same. Let me give you an example. I had one time a couple of people that came to counseling, and they had lost a dear one to an accident, right? And they were in great pain, so there was great resistance to the experience of death. And I used this more than once. Basically, I gave them to read a book that was written by a psychologist that he investigated what happens in between lives, right? Between one life and the other. So I gave them to read this book so that they could expand their belief system in a way that could include the experience of death, because they were coming from spiritual traditions or conditions that were not allowing much of integration of this experience, death, in their psyche. So they were obviously good candidates to a prolonged bereavement, prolonged and painful bereavement. But by expanding their belief system and understanding what death is really and how is the life on the other side, they had much better chances to have a short and less painful bereavement, and usually work pretty well. The work of this doctor was excellent, was very serious and very credible. And for anyone interested, his name is Michael Newton, and he wrote 2 books on the subject. One is called Destiny of Souls, and the other one is called Journey of Souls. So when we are confronted with the death of a dear one, or even our own death, our belief system is absolutely crucial. And either it is capable of embracing the death of the body, or there will be great pain. So sometimes it's as simple as expanding our belief system through some research, a book, some philosophy, a contact with a counselor that has already integrated that experience, right? Has gone through that and integrated the experience, so can help the person to integrate their own experience too. Usually those are the counselors that are most effective, right? Those who went through the experience that the patient or the client is going through. Then they know the terrain and they know how to do this, how to integrate the experience in the psyche. If it's fragmented, if it's not acceptable and there is just resistance, that's sheer pain, right?
So I have to say what comes out of that, what you were saying, I totally agree. So what also comes out of that idea of yours to expand our awareness of different ideas. The person has to be the kind of person that's willing to do that, because I can imagine giving a book of the sort that you were saying to someone that has a very narrow belief system about God, heaven, hell, all of those things, and what that means when you in a very strict belief system goes by the book, so to speak.
I get it, and I totally agree.
So then that person needs to be made. That person needs to be willing to broaden, because for some people, if they would read a book like that, that would be to them an assault on their belief system, right? And they would be there would be so much dissonance. There'd be so much dissonance that they would just go into trauma because of
I get it. So what's her name? Andrea is saying is that, and she's absolutely right, is that you need to discern as a counselor, or a friend, you need to discern if the person that is going through the trauma has a belief system that can be expanded through that particular intervention. If the belief system is too contracted, overly contracted, you can't give them a book like that will really expand their belief system all at once, because they won't be able to go there. So you will need to do different interventions, gradual interventions, to bring them to that point. Now, there is something about the experiencing something painful that puts us in a receptive mode. So when we're going through something really painful and we really want healing, then we are more willing to change our ideas, right? And to get out of our little box. So the receptivity of the client or friend will be determined to a degree by how much pain is there, right? Now, unfortunately, pain or suffering sometimes turns into, the ego can turn it into identity. So the ego gets a morbid reward in staying in pain, because, and the morbid reward is that it's part of my identity, it's who I am now, right? It's who I am. I am a person in bereavement, right? Or whatever. So the ego is a mechanism that wants identity. So it's a tricky mechanism. It can fool off all of us. So we need to be careful. It wants identity. And it doesn't matter if it gets it through something positive or something negative. Identity will secure its survival, right? So now, if the ego is getting identity out of that painful experience, it's more difficult to heal it. So, for example, you see this in the language that we have created to refer to traumas that are no doubt very severe, in terms like, I am a cancer survivor. I am a Holocaust survivor. And I am a this or that survivor, right? And then, yes, we can survive an experience, right? But it's different to heal it. It's not. We should say, I am a healed Holocaust survivor. That's a good identity, right? Because if I'm just a survivor, right? Then it may mean still that there is a lot of trauma that we haven't resolved. And of course, it can be very challenging. But if the ego is hanging on to identity through any of these negative experiences, we will tend to do not heal. I worked in workers' compensation with people that had injuries, right, of all kinds, and severe injuries. I never saw, ever in my life, the type of depressions that I saw in this practice, in this center. Never saw so many depressions with psychotic features, meaning that the depression had gone so deep that the person was becoming psychotic, right? Psychotic depression with psychotic features is something that happens when the depression is very, very deep. And I never saw so many cases like that in my practice as a psychotherapist. And I can see, looking backward, how much identity were my clients deriving from the I am injured, right? I am injured and I am a victim of the system and a victim of the everything, the doctors, the lawyers, that obviously were abusive, workers' compensation, that obviously is abusive, the insurance companies that are extremely abusive. So these poor people were really abused, but also the part that they were playing, how they were holding to this situation was, to a great degree, I am a victim of this system, right? And I'm a victim of the company that didn't take good care of me. So non-duality is encourages us to wake up, right? To wake up. To wake up from what? From our identity. All our identities are false. All of them. There's no identity that is good or bad. No identity is real. An identity is I am this, or I am that. I am a survivor is an identity, obvious. So, and in this respect is that non-duality or Advaita is so extremely valuable, because no other path that I explored in my life is so straightforward in this particular point, and this leads very fast to awakening. While with meditation or other mechanisms, you create new identities. I am a meditator. I am a yogi. I am a Kriya yogi. I am a seeker. So it's a paradox, but the spiritual path begins to multiply your identities, and perhaps you may get rid of the heaviest ones, right? The victimhood and so on, but you cannot get rid. But you create new ones around spirituality. So Advaita points you very clear into the straight path, into, okay, you're none of these identities. None of it defines you. Don't define yourself in any way. You are nothing of what you think you are, right? The only identity that you want to have there is your pure consciousness, but pure consciousness is not personal. Pure consciousness, what is looking through us at this moment, through this mind-body organism, is not personal. It's undifferentiated pure consciousness. And we are that. So awakening happens when we, for the first time, we see this simple thing, that we are awareness, that we are not the persona, right? It's not so difficult to wake up. It's not so difficult. This Saturday, for example, I have an awakening session with a person that has been. I asked him. He's a Spanish man, and I asked him, how. Tell me a little bit about your journey as a seeker, right? So he told me about 10 years, very serious seeker, right? He eventually he became hooked into Advaita, and he said, okay, there is something here that I know is extremely valuable, but I don't know exactly what it is, and he's looking for that. Well, that what is so valuable in Advaita is awakening, because it shows you something that in many other spiritual paths is neglected. Oh, one day you will be one with God. Okay. And that they give you a carrot, and you go after that image. Right. And meditate 3 hours a day, and do this and do that and do that and do that. And then it's endless, right? You have a zillion things to do. Ineffective. In my experience, at least. Ineffective to wake up. Somewhat effective to sometimes, depends, to raise the individuals in the map of consciousness to higher calibrations. Sometimes this list of do's and don'ts turn into the opposite, into lowering your vibration, lowering your state of consciousness because of exaggerations, right? And it's full of that. Yoga especially is full of exaggerations. And then you import a practice of yoga from India where people are living, perhaps an individual is living the life of a sadhu, walking in the Ganges and doing nothing during the day and getting a little bit of money and has plenty of time to do all these practices, and you import them here, where we live a very, very busy life, right? And then you need to do the busy life. On top of it, you need to do all these hours and hours of practice, and then you become completely neurotic. Sorry?
I could see how that would happen, yes, if the expectations then come and then that's not it.
I saw it happening.
Spirituality, you're putting on more expectations.
Yeah, tremendous expectations. Very destructive expectations. However, there's no doubt that in yoga you find extraordinary pearls of wisdom and practices that are very valuable. But look, choose just a few. Don't do everything because you're gonna get crazy.
I have to go back to something you said that I'm not really understanding because in my experience it's different than what you said. But maybe you could enlighten me because you said it's not hard to, I don't know, I'm going to paraphrase. It's not hard to change somebody or show somebody a different way. In my experience, it seems to me, the people that I have tried to show a different way, emotional therapists, I thought it was very difficult.
Right. Okay, Andrea is saying that I mentioned that it's not so hard to show somebody to expand their belief system. Is that what you say? To expand the belief system of somebody. That is not so hard. And in her experience, understand you're a therapist, right? So her experience, she sees it as quite difficult. And well, I don't know at what point I said that it was easy, but if I said it, it's
Maybe you said it
I will have to put a lot of exceptions there. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes your client is ready, and boom, you have one session, and there is tremendous movement, right? And sometimes it's not easy at all. Sometimes it's a complete failure. So it depends on how ready the client is. It also depends on your tools, right? And having effective tools, and how much you have been into practicing psychotherapy or counseling. That it helps to have experience, but above everything, I would say is the readiness of the person. How much they want the change.
Yeah, that's true because people go into therapy for all different reasons. I had clients throughout the years that came in because they were really in pain and they really wanted to change. And then I had other clients that would come in just kind of out of curiosity, And then other clients that, came in just because a friend of theirs was coming and had gone through some changes.
Right.
And they wanted to, experience
Yes. Yes, Diane is saying, is talking about the classical case, where the person that is coming because of motives that are not arising really from their own, but because they have a friend that got good results with you, or because the mother of that person is very interested in bringing them to therapy, or a friend, and they even paid for the sessions, and that is almost always a failure, right? Because the person was not ready, was not really wanting the shift, the change.
The best one for me is when they come and they say they want change, and they're coming for change,
right?
And all they really want is for you to keep coming, so they keep complaining.
Yeah, so Andrea is talking about also a typical situation where they will tell you that they want to change, but actually they rather go to counseling to be heard and keep complaining. And reinforcing with the complaining, reinforcing the state of victimhood. And in that case, the therapist is not helping at all, right? If you see that you are, whether you are a coach or a therapist or a counselor, is the same. If you see that the person is just going there to reinforce their victim position and their identity with the victim position, and complain, then the therapy or counseling process or coaching process is not helping. And the best to do is to terminate the sessions. And the right thing to do, I would say.
Ethical thing. I had a friend
The
that went
ethical
to
thing
therapy
to
for
do, right.
20 years.
Sorry?
I had a friend that went to therapy for 20 years. 20.
Right.
With the same therapist.
Right.
What kind of therapist is this?
Right. So Andrea is talking about a friend that went through 20 years of psychotherapy, complaining and getting nothing out of it. So there was an ethical issue there in the psychotherapist, right?
It depends upon the therapy. And it
Let me-
depends upon, a lot of things.
Let me read here a question online. Or is it sharing? I want to share that I just attended a 10-day Vipassana meditation course in September, where it was all about learning to accept every sensation in the body without any resistance. Yes, that's the right direction, right? That's the right direction. Non-resistance is the entrance towards the higher levels of consciousness. So, and it's an easy entrance. It's the foundation. So, yes to a higher, yes to the moment, as it is, internally and externally. And then from there, you will see that something else will open up eventually. But even if nothing opens up, still you will be in a much better place. It's the foundation. It's the foundation in the practice of Advaita.
So, were you saying that acceptance and moving through non-resistance, that leads to awareness, consciousness?
Yeah, okay, yes. So Diane is asking, well, do you think that non-resistance leads to awareness? Yes, it does, right? I mean, it brings you out of the unaware state of being lost in the mind into a state of awareness of what's going on in the mind, in your feelings and in the experience, and saying yes to it, right? So what happens is that awareness becomes now more disconnected from the stream of thinking and the movie, and it wakes up, so to speak, from the hypnosis of the mind, the hypnosis of the stream of thoughts, right? So yeah, it's true. That's why it works.
Does it work with people with mental illness?
Andreas asking if this would work with people with mental illness. Yes, because we all have mental illnesses. Yeah, everybody's neurotic. According to Freud, everybody is neurotic. Some are psychotic also, but everybody is neurotic, so everybody has mental illnesses. There was a study not long ago that I think 95% of the population falls in one or two or three diagnoses in the DSM-5, right? So there it is. So it works for people. Now, there are pathologies that they don't respond practically to anything, right? So may not respond to this at all. But for normal neurosis, I'm talking about normal neurosis and an individual that is sincere in looking for a better life, is sincere in wanting to let go and to have a better life. It works. Works. And talking about letting go, right? Acceptance is to let go. When you accept, you're letting go. You're not controlling, right? So a very, very valuable step, because actually practicing non-resistance, practicing acceptance, it teaches you to stop controlling. And that is immensely valuable. I remember the experience with this mind-body organism was to go through 24 years of yoga, where in a way, with all these techniques and methods, to control this, to control that, to control the breath, to control the energy, to control the chi, to control, they were in a resistance, right? So then, after 24 years in this, the situation got really tough, and I read the book from Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, which could have been easily titled The Power of Yes, because he talks a lot about what we're talking about today, right? A lot. And to me, I didn't connect much with the concept of the now, coming to the now, and so on. His mind was very restless. So, but the concept of saying yes to what is, yes, that really hit target. And then I saw in that a superior form of yoga. And it is a superior form of yoga. Let me read to you something from, let me see if I find it, something from Eckhart Tolle in regard to this, which is quite nice. Okay. Here it is. The ego says, I shouldn't have to suffer. And that thought makes you suffer so much more. It is a distortion of the truth, which is always paradoxical. The truth is that you need to say yes to suffering before you can transcend it. See what we're talking about? See, he's saying exactly what I have been trying to mention, is that the foundation is non-resistance, is saying yes to suffering. From there, you can transcend it. How you transcend it? How you transcend suffering? You transcend suffering when you enter a kensho, when you enter a satori, when you enter into a new way of perceiving life. And that is a blessing, but it comes naturally to you when you have moved away from non-resistance and you're already gliding into the yes to life as it is. So let me repeat this again. the ego says, I shouldn't have to suffer. And that thought makes you suffer so much more. And the last part, he says, the truth is that you need to say yes to suffering before you can transcend it. So let's say you're suffering, yes, you're having negative feelings, fear, this, that. If you can say yes to that, and you can really mean it, bang, you went from, let's say, fear at 100, bang, into 350. And then from there, you can glide into higher levels of consciousness. But this is the foundation. So don't try to jump too much. Don't try to lift your level of consciousness from a very low feeling into bliss immediately, right? Or oneness with the whole universe, right?
Well, even if you do that, you come crashing down.
Yes, and you will get frustrated.
The work you will have there.
Right, you will get frustrated, and that will increase your suffering, because you're trying to go into oneness, to have a kensho, you're trying to go into rest as awareness, or into rest as open awareness, and you can't, right? And then you're bounced back into the mind, and bounce back into the mind. That's suffering. That's not a nice place to be. So move first into a yes.
And
Right.
the beauty of saying yes and acceptance, Jim, is not only does it move you into consciousness, but also in the now. When you say yes and you move into acceptance, you're in the present, you're in the now.
Yes. So this is another interesting thing of why this works that Diane is bringing, which is that when you say yes to the experience, in order to say yes to something, you need to see it, right? So awareness is activated to begin with, and then you're in the now. So the yes brings you to the now. That's why Eckhart Tolle in his book insists so much into the yes, right? Now, Eckhart Tolle, in his book, The Power of Now, in a way he's telling us, get out of the mind and come to your senses, right? Come to the here and now. This, what is happening here and now and nothing else. No interpretations, no thinking. Just pure, the pure sensorial experience. And awareness, of course, right? So to do that, basically, you need to recognize that the story, what is going on in the mind, this stream of thoughts that is going on in the mind, are no more than stories. They're just stories. Jim Driver likes to put in those terms too. He says, get out of your stories, come to the here and now. So when you recognize the stream of thought as just stories, nothing real, they lose their grip, and then you can use the pointer, come to the here and now, and you ground yourself in the here and now. And you get out of the stream of thought. Great. But if your mind is too restless, if your mind is moving too much, and if your stream of thought is kind of an ADD stream of thought, you may not be able to do that. Because the here and now, when you do that and you really ground yourself in the here and now, it calibrates 600, right? So you're jumping from a very low level, bang, into 600, and it's difficult. So I suggest you do it in 2 steps. First, you say yes to the stream of thoughts. You say yes to the distraction, the hypnosis of the mind, instead of trying to jump directly into the here and now and get rid of all the stories. First, you say yes to the stories, whether they are enjoyable or painful. And then, from that place, you may jump to the here and now.
So it sounds like you're advising that one raise one's level more and more because it's easier to go gradually than leap.
Yes.
You don't want to be caught in suffering. But what about the expression, man's desperation is God's opportunity?
Good, I like it.
And in Zen Buddhism, they actually, at least in Rinzai Buddhism, they actually try to put people into states of desperation so that they can make a very powerful leap.
That's right. Okay. So Roy is saying, what about the saying, man's desperation is God's opportunity, meaning that when you are really at the bottom of, and you are really suffering, there is the possibility of having a great spiritual experience, right? A great breakthrough. And it has happened to many teachers. It happened to Eckhart Tolle, right? Well, I would say that is something that does happen, because everything has exceptions. But it's not something that I would recommend that you do every time, right? That every time you are into suffering, you try to jump to something very high, or you try to dive into the suffering. It's going to probably be quite painful, but if it happens spontaneously, right, like it happened to Eckhart Tolle, was not something that he did it. It just happened to him. He was in this extreme pain, and it happened to him. He bounced back into a very high level of consciousness, right? So if that happens by itself, I would say yes, fantastic. But that consciously, because a practice is something that you consciously decide, right? And or is apparently consciously decided, apparently at least. And I would suggest that you don't try to do that. Now, there is a practice, which is a practice too, that is part of the, I think it's called, I think it's part of the Rosicrucian tradition. So when you're going through something extremely painful, you dive into the feeling and you really feel with all your might, all your attention, you feel the pain. And you concentrate in the suffering, until you go through. And then the suffering is the cross, right? And what comes after is the rose, right? So the Rosicrucians means those who attain the rose through the cross, through suffering. And they do it by diving into the suffering. Now, I have a friend of mine that he did this, and a circumstance that was extreme. His wife had cancer, and the situation was horribly painful. And then he laid down, and it was kind of intuitive. He was not a Rosicrucian. He just simply told me that he laid down, began to dive into his feeling of desperation and suffering, and bang, he crossed to the other side, and he had a wonderful spiritual experience. So yes, but notice also that even in that, when you really give all your attention to suffering, to that feeling, in a way you're accepting it.
So that's the no pain, no gain path.
That's the no pain, no gain path. Look, the entire path is no pain, no gain. It's pain and suffering that have led to all these technologies to begin with, right? Whatever technology you find there is a technology to solve or transcend human suffering. So yes, no pain, no gain. we grow up through suffering. Suffering is our teacher. Yogananda said that. He said suffering is our teacher, and then he added, and it's a good teacher for those who are quick to learn. And the opposite is true, right?
I've learned a lot from the path of suffering, but I prefer the happy path.
Yeah, we all prefer happiness, right? Obviously, right? But we don't choose suffering. It comes to us, and when we are there, we need to do something about it.
I think a lot of our suffering is our own creation, though.
Yes, a lot of our suffering is our own creation. Yeah, because it's our interpretation of the situation, right? We create it with our mind. But in a way, we as individuals, we are innocent. How? Because our resistance is connected to programs that are part of our society. They are not entirely our programs, right? Let's say, for example, death. Death is something that is, in this society, especially in the West, is dreaded, right? Everybody dreads death. In other societies, death is embraced. So when we are resisting the inevitable, which is, death is inevitable, right? When we go into great resistance against death and it's our turn, most of the pain that we are experiencing, that we experience as a result of that, is because our society attitude towards death is entirely unproductive, I would say, conducive to suffering.
Neurotic.
So neurotic, so that we cannot even blame ourselves so much for this situation. This is the result of a crooked civilization that grows up in great ignorance. We grew up in great ignorance, all of us, and we're trying to get out of it.
So the first step is to move to a more healthy, sane society.
No, the first step is not to move into a healthy society, Roy, because we cannot change the way things are.
You gotta move
Yeah, I know you are trying to change it through your...
If you can find one.
And that would require a UFO, let's face it.
Well, I'm hoping that you can get one on lease.
Require
Right,
UFO.
Or maybe a rent,
Rent or ride share.
Yeah. That's
Maybe just a cave in the Indies.
maybe.
Okay, here is another question from Mamata. She says, I also have another question. How can we get rid of traumas from previous lives? Okay, I have heard of two methods. And one is you do a session into hypnosis with a good past life therapist, and if he or she is effective, will guide you through to experience the trauma and heal the trauma. Sometimes just remembering the trauma has a big healing effect. The other option is, and this is a funny one, but I have heard about it, and it's easy to practice. Before you go to sleep, you ask the divine to get rid of all your past life traumas and to wipe the slate, right?
That one works?
Well, I don't know if it works, but it's worth trying, right?
What do you got to lose?
It's pretty simple, right? Another question is, how can we make these traumas to surface up in the first place? Well, I would say that they can surface up in two ways. One is through the use of hypnosis or meditation. You may remember, right, the experience. And the other possibility is that there will be a situation that is presented to you that will be in a way similar to the situation that you experienced in a previous lifetime for the purpose of you solving that trauma. Although you don't know that this is connected to a past life experience, you will be facing a similar situation, you will resolve it, and the job is done. Then another question here is, how does surrender fit in with what we are discussing tonight? Okay, very good question. I like it. See, surrender is very similar to acceptance, right? So when we surrender to what is, we could say that acceptance of what is surrendering to what is, right? The ego surrenders to this, to what is.
Or it surrenders
Meaning
resistance.
it surrenders the resistance, right?
Giving up the attempt to control.
Giving the attempt to control, that's surrendering, right? You let go. So the words surrender and acceptance here are practically interchangeable.
John, there's a really good movie that illustrates in a funny way, and many of you have probably seen it, about saying yes, called Yes Man by Jim Carrey, and of course Jim Carrey is an Eckhart Tolle follower, so
Fun, right?
that's a really
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie. Did you watch it?
I saw
Did,
it.
do you like it, guys?
Yeah,
Really good.
It's really good. It's funny.
Yeah, it's
Very
funny, and it
Okay.
illustrates, kind of what you're talking about.
Right. Okay.
In a
So
funny way.
very good. Let me recommend it to those online. The name of the movie is
Yes Man.
Yes Man,
Uh-huh.
and it's by
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey is the director and the actor, right?
I
I don't know
don't.
if he's a director, but he's
He's
the actor.
the main
Jim
actor.
Carrey is the main actor, at least.
Yeah.
And he has been a disciple of Eckhart Tolle, a very advanced disciple. He got a very powerful awakening some years ago. So, I look forward to watch the movie too. So, Yes Man. Okay.
So if you're practicing the surrender path, does it help to have a white flag?
A stake, a white flag, that's all you need.
You can have a mental like flag.
That would work. It's cheaper.
You can visualize a white flag.
I think it's the way to go, but I know we have so many, myself included, things that I hang on to. Working on it.
Well, that's the beauty of it. You just let go one by one. All those things you're hanging on to. Till eventually you're not hanging on to anything. You are
You're just falling.
nothing, just nothing.
Free
Oh,
fall.
right. Tom Petty fell right out of the universe.
The muscle, this practice of practicing acceptance of what is it develops them like a muscle, the capacity to go into this place, to go into move into acceptance pretty fast and efficiently in seconds. So when you begin to practice this, if you don't get discouraged, eventually it will you will get there. The reason why in the beginning is a little bit more difficult is because we're not used to it. We're used to do the opposite. We're used to resist, right? Especially in the West, where here we're supposed to resist everything, right? The other day, there was a guy in the coffee shop that he tells me, "Oh, the weather is changing. It's going to be colder, much colder." And then I teased him and I said, "Well, it's going to change anyway. So either you accept it or you don't." But he said to me, "No, I will resist it."
Good luck, huh?
Just to buy a sweater.
That's very smart. Yeah. What is this?
That's very smart.
What is this?
That's very smart.
trusting Mother Nature never works.
I generally just try to choose a happier path.
Yes.
It's happier to not resist than it is to resist. It's kind of simple.
Yes. So Roy is saying that he usually looks for a happier path. Yeah, that makes sense with Roy. So he's saying it's usually a happier situation to accept than to resist.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
what
right.
makes you miserable. It's no fun.
That's right. Resisting makes you miserable.
Yeah. There's better things to
Not
do.
fun at all.
It's just that when you're very, if
Well,
difficulty rises and becomes more difficult as your attachment to the outcome increases. So when it's something that is extremely important to you, it's much harder to resist and let it go than something that's just relatively, I lost my sweater
right.
and I'll just buy a new one. Okay, I mean, it was a favorite sweater.
Yes, and Andre is saying something very true. She's saying, well, if something is really important for you, then it will be difficult to accept, right? But if it's not that important, then it will be easier. So let's say you lost a sweater that you absolutely loved, and it will be difficult to accept, right? But if you didn't care much for the sweater because it's not important for you, then you will let it go, right?
Yes.
Or you may lose something even more valuable, right? So yeah, that is true. And so notice that the key word there is the word importance, right? How important it is for you. And there is a particular practice in non-duality that is to do not give importance to anything, right? So there is this non-dual teacher. He's an excellent writer and teacher. His name is Robert Wolf. And Robert, he says that he starts the day sitting down and telling himself, nothing matters, nothing matters, nothing matters, right? Nothing is important. So if nothing is important for you, if you come to that place where nothing is really important, although you take care of business, right? I'm not talking about not taking care of business. I'm talking internally, nothing is important for you. This is just a dream. This is just a movie. And nothing is really important. You're free. You're free. You don't need to come to these sessions. You got it, right? You're completely liberated. If you are into that space where nothing is important for you, and you are taking care of business properly, you're free.
Well, the Buddhists teach non-attachment.
So, non-attachment, exactly. Right? If you have attained such a detachment that nothing is important in the dream, that's it. You made it.
Then you don't need to come anymore. But I like hearing you talk.
Huh?
I like hearing you talk, though.
Keep
Yeah.
attachment no matter what. Right?
I won't have a reason to come back.
So I highly recommend the practice. You start the day with that pointer. Nothing is important. Nothing is important. And nothing is important really. It's a dream. This is a dream. What we are, consciousness, looking at the dream with all its aspects. What are its aspects? 5. Thoughts, emotions, drives, beliefs, and sensations. Those are the 5 aspects of the dream. And awareness is looking at the dream. If you can see this as a movie, Yogananda said that too. He said, if you can see life as a movie, you're free. Yeah? You're detached. So here is another question. How does surrender fit? No. I answered that. Okay. And this is an interesting thing because it's more like a kensho again, right? It's like a kensho, or it could be a satori if it's longer. But you're moved into a place where you see life as a movie, right? You see life as a movie. oh, this is a whole, it's just a movie, right? And something shifted. That's a Kensho state. And you get there first by steps, right? Practice acceptance first, and then suddenly you may be in that practice, and suddenly you begin to see that everything is a movie, because it is a movie. And you're an actor in the movie. I mean, you as the mind-body organism, which is not you. You as consciousness, which is the real you, you are the seeing of the movie. You're seeing the movie. You're looking at the movie.
There's a children's song which goes, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Beautiful, right?
So the gently down the stream is not resisting. And
Not resisting.
life is a dream.
Who created that song?
I don't know, but there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah, there is.
No,
Sounds good.
she's just joking.
Who said it?
I
said a Taoist.
I Taoist.
That
Excellent. Yeah.
sounds right.
Yeah, quite interesting that the song in the second part, gently down the stream, is pointing to acceptance, right? And then the last sentence is, can you repeat it?
Life is but a dream.
Life is but
So
a dream.
Merrily, 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 merrily.
Then you'll be happy.
Merry, like merry, happy, happy,
Right.
happy, happy, happy. Life is but a dream.
Life is but a dream.
So if you row your boat gently,
Right.
you'll be happy.
And if you're going down the stream,
Can you repeat all the words?
Okay, so row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
That's non-resistance.
Merrily, 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 merrily.
That's acceptance.
yes,
Life.
yes, yes.
4 yeses. Life is but a dream.
Life is but a dream.
Nirvana.
Amazing.
And the amazing thing, if you look at it from a musical standpoint, the song is around, meaning that somebody starts singing row, row, row your boat, then the next person comes in, and you're all singing together, and the way it's constructed, that it's all harmonious, it's not discord, so that it,
It's
it's like a circular
We
oneness.
sang it like that in elementary
Happiness
school.
runs in a circular motion.
Yeah, me too, but we did, because we're all,
Yeah, my grandchildren and I, that's how we sing it.
I don't, when you sing like that, you don't remember whether you're rowing or you're going down the stream or what, because it's all, you're breathing it, you don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I remember singing that in like the grade school.
Yeah, it's a great school, yeah, yeah, and we do those rounds.
Well, next satsang, let's do it. We need a bigger room.
How we start each satsang.
Let's go on dancing. Right?
Bring your own boat.
You guide us, Roy.
Oh, no.
Well, the body is actually the boat.
That's right. And water, life is the water. The stream.
Now we're really getting deep. Metaphysical. Okay, his name was, goodness,
Whose
Elphalet
name?
Orem Light. He wrote your book. Elphalet Orem Light. Okay, name is that's the name of the man that wrote the
What's his name?
Elphalet, like elephant, but it's Elphalet Orem Light in 1842.
Wow.
I named it
Elphalet.
Or
Right.
1842.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was an American teacher.
Oh, he was American.
American teacher and author of grammar and composition textbooks. And he's credited as the composer of the tune to the popular song, The Tune, Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have been an hour and 45 minutes here, so let's call it a day, right? Thank you those online for coming and participating, and thank you all guys for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. We have a donation jar here.
That's right here.
Donation jar.
Yes, those
I would say
online,
basket,
if you
but
want
it's
to
not
make a
basket.
donation, you have to go to the
A
email,
glass container.
and there is a link there to
It's almost
make
like
the
that.
donation.
Like crystal.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.